Across the preceding century and a half, human civilization has encountered a minimum of 4 distinct occasions where complete annihilation appeared imminent, with only extraordinary circumstances preventing total extinction. These are the documented incidents that will be presented for examination. Proceeding with the investigation. Crisis at Okinawa Military Installation, October 28, 1962. During 2015, United States governmental authorities granted permission to military veteran John Borden to publicly disclose details regarding a catastrophic incident that brought the world to the threshold of destruction in 1962 throughout the Cuban Missile Crisis period. The event transpired on October 28th, when the American military installation situated on Okinawa Island, where Borden maintained his service assignment, received operational directives mandating immediate nuclear weapon deployment against the USSR, China, and Korea. The Okinawa military facility maintained an arsenal of 32 nuclear-armed missiles. Captain William Bassett, assigned to duty rotation that particular day, experienced profound disbelief upon receiving the operational directive. He developed suspicions that this must constitute some form of administrative error. However, extremely limited time remained available for consideration. Captain Bassett experienced concern regarding the threat assessment level designated within the directive as DEFCON 2, despite operational protocols requiring nuclear weapon authorization exclusively at DEFCON 1 designation. Subsequently, Bassett theorized that Okinawa could potentially become the primary target for Soviet missile assault. Therefore, headquarters located within U.S. territorial boundaries transmitted the most expeditious directive possible, inadvertently omitting the elevation of threat assessment to DEFCON 1 status. Captain William Bassett discovered himself confronting an extraordinarily challenging predicament. During that critical moment, the destiny of all human existence rested within his authority. He comprehended that implementing the directive would result in his immediate destruction alongside the entire planetary population. He simultaneously recognized that failing to implement the directive, should the threat prove authentic, would similarly result in his destruction alongside the entire planetary population. However, if no discernible distinction existed, what justification supported missile deployment? A possibility remained that this constituted a false emergency alert. Ultimately, Bassett obtained the telephone and contacted his superior officers. He reported receiving an ambiguous directive that experienced distortion during teletype transmission. Subsequently, leadership transmitted a secondary directive. Within this communication, clear instructions again mandated immediate nuclear strike implementation against the USSR, China, and Korea. Bassett experienced perspiration, yet continued disbelieving the reality of ongoing circumstances. He instructed his subordinate personnel at the installation to avoid hastening nuclear strike procedures. Nevertheless, one junior officer expressed disagreement and refused compliance with the unlawful directive. He initiated missile preparation procedures for deployment from the control station positioned at the installation's opposite end. Subsequently, Bassett, without extended deliberation, dispatched 2 armed military personnel to the control station with instructions to eliminate the officer should he attempt missile deployment without authorization. However, Bassett personally returned to his superior officers and, unable to maintain composure, delivered an ultimatum stating, either elevate the threat assessment to DEFCON 1 or revoke the attack directive. At this point, the commanding officers experienced panic. They immediately conducted careful examination of previously transmitted instructions and identified an error. Following this discovery, they immediately canceled the issued nuclear attack directive. This demonstrates how, due to one individual's intervention, all planetary life received preservation. Following the incident, authorities naturally conducted comprehensive investigation and interrogated all involved personnel. Investigation revealed that responsibility for the nearly catastrophic end-of-world scenario belonged to one major who transmitted an incorrect code sequence. You will experience surprise learning the punishment this major received. He simply received rank reduction. However, Captain William Bassett died in 2011 without receiving recognition for world preservation because public awareness regarding his actions only emerged 4 years following his death. Stanislav Petrov, the individual who preserved global civilization, September 25, 1983. Remarkably, Russia also possesses precisely the same type of hero. This individual is Stanislav Petrov. He similarly preserved the entire world from certain destruction. However, unlike William Bassett, he survived to witness the moment when global awareness of his accomplishment emerged. For this achievement, he received 25,000 euros compensation, the Dresden Prize in Germany, and the World Citizens Association recognition in New York. You will now discover precisely how he preserved global civilization. The incident occurred during the evening of September 25, 1983. The Cold War remained at maximum intensity. At the command facility of the Missile Attack Warning System, positioned near Moscow, Soviet Army Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov maintained duty assignment. Suddenly, catastrophic events commenced. The early space warning system for nuclear attack, operational for merely 1 year, transmitted attack signals from the USA. Satellites monitoring installations on enemy territory identified flashes from operational engines of intercontinental ballistic missiles. At 13:01, the space system announced, "Missile attack. Launch identified. Ballistic missile launch identified. Trajectory, West Coast USA. Flight duration, 15 minutes. Personnel immediately assume positions. Second missile identified. Second missile identified." The automated system indicated 5 Minuteman missiles equipped with thermonuclear charges proceeding toward the Soviet Union. Petrov maintained obligation to immediately contact Andropov for retaliatory strike authorization. Time diminished in minute intervals. Immediate action required implementation. However, logical reasoning informed Petrov that circumstances appeared incorrect. He questioned, why would the USA deploy only 5 missiles if nuclear war commenced? 5 warheads definitely provided insufficient capability to destroy all strategically significant USSR objectives. He experienced concern that according to system data, deployment originated from only one American installation, not from all installations, as should occur during authentic attack scenarios. Additionally, no second missile wave followed. Nevertheless, excessive stakes existed, and Petrov already convulsively approached the red telephone. The additional problem involved the inability to recall nuclear missiles after deployment, unlike typical aircraft procedures. Therefore, no error tolerance existed. However, Petrov subsequently managed to regain composure and, following common-sense guidance, determined this represented system malfunction and made the decisive choice to disregard automated readings and avoid launching missiles against the USA. Petrov reporting. Status report. I am providing false information. Are you declaring this represents a false alarm? Affirmative, sir. False alarm. No missiles. Petrov violated all instructions and regulations by declaring the alarm false. Subsequent investigation confirmed his accuracy. System malfunction occurred due to sensor illumination from sunlight reflected from high-altitude cloud formations. Later, modifications were implemented to the space system to prevent such circumstances. This incident, which nearly dispatched the entire planet toward catastrophe, remained classified for numerous years. Declassification only occurred in 1998. Later, Petrov stated that it should not have been his duty shift that day. He was simply providing substitution for another individual. He also emphasized that one required truly exceptional nerve stability to avoid panic submission. Petrov acknowledged that following strict instructions and transferring responsibility to higher leadership would have been easier. Should someone lacking engineering education have occupied his position, that exact approach would have been implemented. In 2006 at New York UN headquarters, Stanislav Petrov received special recognition from the international public organization World Citizens Association. The award consists of a crystal statuette depicting a hand holding a globe with the engraved inscription, "To the man who prevented nuclear war." In 2016, Petrov became a Dresden Prize laureate, awarded for armed conflict prevention. This prize includes 25,000 euros. In 2014 in Denmark, a documentary film about Stanislav Petrov was produced titled The Man Who Saved the World. Unfortunately, the previous year Stanislav Petrov died at age 77. Black Saturday, October 27, 1962, Vasily Arkhipov. Subsequently, we examine October 27, 1962. This represents one of history's most significant dates, designated as Black Saturday. October 27, 1962, officially represents the day when global consensus considers the planet reached closest proximity to nuclear war initiation. However, the most remarkable aspect involves end-of-world prevention accomplished by a single individual, specifically Soviet naval officer Vasily Alexandrovich Arkhipov. Observe this individual. You should express gratitude toward him, because without his intervention, you would not currently exist. Here is how events developed. In 1961, the United States positioned nuclear missiles in Turkey, which from such proximity to the USSR could easily reach Soviet urban centers, including Moscow, eliminating our capability to deliver equivalent retaliatory strikes. Therefore, the USSR rapidly began implementing countermeasures, specifically clandestine placement of their nuclear missiles on Cuba Island, which from that position could easily reach America's primary urban centers. On October 14, 1962, U.S. intelligence discovered nuclear missiles positioned in Cuba, and this greatly alarmed the state's government. The Americans immediately established complete Cuban encirclement and threatened to attack ships attempting approach. Subsequently, Khrushchev declared the blockade illegal and announced that any vessel under Soviet flag would disregard it. He threatened that if American forces attacked Soviet ships, immediate retaliatory strike would follow. The circumstances began exceeding control parameters. America and the USSR initiated nuclear war preparation. On October 27th, circumstances intensified to maximum levels because on this day, that specific Black Saturday, the Soviet Union eliminated an American reconnaissance aircraft flying over Cuba using anti-aircraft weapons. The pilot perished. At this moment, the American government concluded that this represented the conclusion, time to prepare for termination. U.S. Defense Secretary Robert McNamara questioned himself, "Will I observe tomorrow's sunrise?" On the identical day, Cuba's primary leader Fidel Castro contacted Khrushchev and requested him to deliver a preemptive nuclear strike against America, stating that the Cuban population was prepared to sacrifice themselves for victory over American imperialism. On this day, the world maintained suspended breath. Everyone anticipated the initial spark to commence mutual nuclear missile bombardment. This spark was approaching ignition directly in the ocean. The circumstances involved Americans discovering Soviet submarine B-59 near Cuba, which had lost radio communication with Moscow on the same day. U.S. forces initiated small depth charge deployment. This represented a signal for submarine surface emergence for identification. However, the Soviet crew lacked this knowledge. Unknown to American forces, B-59 carried one nuclear torpedo with destructive capability equivalent to the Hiroshima atomic bomb. The submarine experienced small explosions from left and right sides, and internal temperature increased dramatically. Unwilling to surface, but certain they were experiencing attack, the submarine commanders began determining whether to deploy a nuclear torpedo against the Americans. All three commanders' agreement was required for deployment. Ultimately, two commanders agreed to proceed with launch. Nuclear torpedo preparation for deployment commenced. Load the nuclear torpedo. I emphasize again that this was Black Saturday, the Cuban Missile Crisis peak. On this day, a Soviet aircraft was eliminated over Cuba and the entire world approached war threshold. No doubt exists that if submarine B-59 had deployed a nuclear torpedo against the U.S. fleet on precisely this day, nuclear war would have commenced instantly. However, two submarine commanders positioned themselves before the control panel, preparing for launch and awaiting consent from the third commander named Vasily Arkhipov. Planetary destiny depended upon his decision. Two of us agree. I await your decision. Negative. I do not provide permission. Vasily Arkhipov's disagreement that day enabled you to observe this video today and generally exist in this world. On October 28th, the submarine surfaced and permitted states inspection. Subsequently, the USSR and USA conducted successful negotiations for situation resolution, and the Soviet Union removed missiles from Cuba, while the USA removed missiles from Turkey. Thus concluded the Cuban Missile Crisis, alternatively designated the Caribbean Crisis. During a Havana conference on October 13, 2002, dedicated to the Caribbean Crisis 40th anniversary, Robert McNamara stated that nuclear war was significantly closer to initiation than previously understood. Thomas Blanton from George Washington University stated that a guy named Arkhipov saved the world. In 2003, Vasily Arkhipov posthumously received the Italian National Prize, Angels of Our Time, for steadfastness, courage, and endurance demonstrated in extreme conditions. In 2017, Arkhipov posthumously received the Future of Life Prize. This award included $50,000, which was provided to his daughter and grandson. The extraordinary coincidence. Now let us analyze something. Remember, at the presentation beginning, I initially described Captain William Bassett's story, who on Okinawa Island received nuclear attack initiation orders, but opposed them and compelled leadership to verify transmitted data. Remarkably, this event occurred the day following Vasily Arkhipov's nuclear war prevention by not allowing torpedo deployment from the submarine. Remarkable, isn't it? A terrible coincidence. As if some mystical force genuinely desired end-of-world initiation. Too many incidents across 2 days in different planetary locations, and each separately nearly resulted in nuclear war. It's simply incomprehensible. The asteroid that nearly terminated everything, 1883. If the initial 3 stories led you to consider that the world is fragile and the exclusive method to prevent hypothetical catastrophe involves completely abandoning nuclear weapon utilization, don't reach hasty conclusions. Because the paradox involves nuclear weapons preventing major countries from initiating World War III. Furthermore, nuclear weapons aren't the exclusive threat to all of us. The next story clearly demonstrates this. Let us travel to 1883. It was precisely during this time that Earth's apocalypse should have commenced. You have all probably heard that in 1908, a small asteroid designated the Tunguska meteorite exploded in the atmosphere and destroyed more than 2,000 square kilometers of dense Russian forest. The explosion power is estimated at 50 megatons, equivalent to the energy of the most powerful hydrogen bomb ever detonated. Therefore, 25 years before this, Earth nearly experienced 3,275 Tunguska-type explosions, which could have completely eliminated humanity. The circumstances involve Mexican astronomer José Bonilla observing a giant comet that fragmented into numerous pieces, which passed 600 kilometers from Earth in August 1883. To help you understand, 600 kilometers represents simply a ridiculous distance on cosmic scales. 600 kilometers is approximately the distance between Moscow and St. Petersburg. We were simply incredibly fortunate. According to calculations, if these fragments had impacted our planet, the explosion force would have been equivalent to 3,000 Tunguska meteorites. This case again confirms how fragile the existence of various life forms is in cosmic space. That concludes everything. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.